Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz has quit. Gantz's resignation is the latest sign of rising domestic dissent over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the war, the first major political blow to him in the course of this conflict. His departure means that Netanyahu will lose the backing of a centrist bloc that has helped broaden support for the government in Israel and abroad. However, Benny Gantz's departure will not endanger the parliamentary majority of 64 seats in the 120-seat Knesset held by the ruling right-wing coalition. The question, however, is what impact will this resignation have on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government? Is this likely to have any bearing on the military operations in Gaza? My name is Hemkor Saroya, and to discuss this, we have with us Alan Burstein, Visiting Assistant Professor, Israel Institute Fellow, Department of Political Science, University of California, Irvine. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on WION. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
Sir, Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz's resignation, it leaves Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu more reliant on far-right allies of his government. Where does this leave the Netanyahu government, and how do you think the Israeli Prime Minister is positioned now?
So, as you said, the fact that the war cabinet has now been disbanded means that the balance of power has shifted much more towards the extreme right-wing elements within Netanyahu's government. Now, the war cabinet is a new concept. Israel's never had such a thing. It was established only on October 11th, which is 4 days into the war, specifically in order to move the balance of power, in order to not have the government that is made up of very extreme right-wing elements be making all the decisions, but instead to have Benny Gantz come in, who is a former general, and have a war cabinet that makes decisions in a more, let's say, calculated manner and not just ideologically driven of more hawkish ideas. Now that war cabinet is over, so really we're going to see not only the rising strength of right-wing elements, but we're going to see Prime Minister Netanyahu pushed even more into a corner. He is already really in a corner between the pressure of the United States, pressures in Israel, pressures of the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. Now all of a sudden, those in Israel who are pulling him more towards a right-wing agenda and more expansionist warlike ideas just got a lot stronger in the last day.
Right. Now, Gantz said that Netanyahu is preventing true victory and making empty promises. The major bone of contention being that there was no well-defined post-war plan for Gaza. Do you reckon that this will have an impact on Israel's military operations in Gaza at all?
At this point, it's hard to say, because one of the grievances that Gantz had is that the war was continuing without an actual day after plan, without a plan of what's going to be in Gaza after. So seemingly, Gantz leaving, that situation can just continue. Netanyahu and the right-wing government can continue doing exactly what they were saying, and this shouldn't bother them. What may happen, however, is up until now, the U.S. government has been relying on Gantz to be a moderating force, to be sort of a voice of reason within Netanyahu's government. With that gone, we may see an escalation in the criticism and possibly even in actions that the U.S. government will take in order to circumvent some of Netanyahu's agenda. Because one of the reasons that Prime Minister Netanyahu has not put out a day after plan is that the different right-wing elements in his government have repeatedly said that if he puts out a day after plan that does not include, for example, settlements in the Gaza Strip or something that the right-wing elements want, they'll leave the government. So Netanyahu can't explicitly say that Israel will not occupy Gaza forever. On the other hand, if he says that Israel will occupy Gaza forever, he will be in trouble with the United States and the world. So that's one of the reasons that he is constantly vague, constantly saying total victory, complete victory. And Gantz is joining now a lot of people in the world that are saying that doesn't mean anything. What does that mean in terms of what will be in Gaza? So Netanyahu is going to continue probably the way he did. What matters is how other actors, either opposition actors in Israel or the world, now respond to these developments.
Absolutely. In fact, I was going to come to this. Israel's strongest ally, we're talking about the United States, as you just were, does not seem too confident of Israel's conduct in this war. The United States has made its displeasure known publicly multiple times now. However, that's not led to any sort of policy changes. And I'm talking about U.S. policy on Israel. What's your take on that?
So there have been minor policy changes in the sense of holding up weapons shipments, which is something the United States has not done when Israel has been in crisis for many, many decades. There have been a couple of small things that the U.S. has done to try to signal that this time they're taking things seriously. if we look at things like paradropping of aid into the Gaza Strip, Israel did not want that. Israel wanted to control all the aid. The United States said, no, you have to do that. The United States conditioned all kinds of weapon supplies to Israel also on establishing the pier in Gaza. So the United States has been escalating quite dramatically the rhetoric, also saying that what Israel will be doing in Rafah would be a mistake, saying it is not necessary for the war. That's really a collision with Israel. We are likely to see, on the one hand, the Biden administration trying to apply more pressure on Israel on the one hand. On the other hand, we have to remember, it's currently June. There are elections in the United States coming up in November. Biden is in a very, very difficult position, with being pulled on the one hand with the traditional support of the United States towards Israel. It is a very bad political move for a U.S. politician to not be full support of Israel on the one hand. On the other hand, there are a lot of elements within the Democratic Party that are becoming more critical, that are saying, okay, but what is this aid going to? And one of the very interesting things that we've seen, one of the first times that the United States has instructed Israel, it said it is willing, just recently, it is willing to send over the shipment of weapons that it had held up. However, it requires that Israel not make use of it in Rafah. That's a big sign of mistrust. That's saying we're going to give you weapons, but we don't actually trust what you're going to do with them, so you're not allowed to use them here and there. So we are seeing the pressure mounting. I'll say one more thing. The United States is very worried about the escalations between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. The United States is extremely worried because that is really escalating, and that, if it explodes, could lead to a regional war that involves Syria, involves Iran, and the U.S. does not want that headache. So in addition to pressuring Netanyahu on Gaza, I think one of the most important things for the United States right now is going to be to try to curtail the right-wing government in Israel from expanding up north as well, or escalating the situation, because that'll be a game changer for the entire region.
All right. Well, Mr. Burstein, thank you so much for joining us on WION World as One with your insights on this. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.